That's what I strive for, is the magic of having a moment on set where everything goes away and there's no separation. When you are able to become one with a character, and I mean, for me, that's so rare, but when it happens, it's like, oh, this is it. This is why I love doing it. This is what makes me feel fulfilled, is when you're able to meld and feel like one when you're embodying somebody else. And I think that's what makes people feel things when they're watching movies. It's what makes me feel things when I'm acting. It happens so rarely, but it's the motivation almost. It's what drives.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Grace Van Patten is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. Do you have a typical way that you begin your preparation process when you get a new character? What is the typical first step, if you have a typical first step, toward kind of wrapping your arms around this new person that you have to embody?
It's a great question. And again, something I figure out and discover with each character, each part, because I do feel like it's different for each job I go into. But I feel like if there's some similarity to every project I've done, I think I start very, very vague. I think one of the first things I do is really try to picture the world around this character and just think, like, what type of music does she listen to? What's going on historically at this time? Who are her best friends? Why are they her best friends? What's her family dynamic? Like, I really try to set up the world around the character before I delve into the mindset of them. And I find that helps a lot because it sets it all up, and I feel like that's how you can kind of decide who the person is. Like anyone, you meet someone for the first time and you learn about their upbringing or whatever, and that shapes a person.
Yeah.
And my favorite performances and favorite movies is when they set up such a specific world and the character is so specific and feels like such a real living, breathing human being. So I feel like that's my initial step, if I even have one. And I feel like I'm almost making this up as I'm speaking, but it feels right to say. And the world is really important to me.
I'm always fascinated when actors are able to allow themselves to like fill in blanks.
Right.
Because of course that would help, but I think that I would be like so worried about filling in the wrong blank. Like I would almost want to like make the writer come over my house for like 2 weeks. And like every time I'm thinking about one of those things, I would want it to pass through him or her. You know what I mean? And get the authorization. And that just feels like it's so counterproductive, because you have to make this person a part of you, right? I mean,
Right.
there has to be a point where it has to kind of break off from that. But how do you deal with that though? Like how do you decide on what music she would listen to? Do you feel any of that kind of stress I was just talking about?
Sometimes, and communication is such a big part of my process too. Like, I love talking to the directors and talking to the writers, and even better if they're both, if they're writer and
Yeah.
director, they understand the characters so deeply and they created them. And a lot of times the characters are part of themselves, and they really deeply understand it. And that's always so helpful to me. Like with the show I just did, Tell Me Lies, Megan Oppenheimer, who wrote it, it's so it's such a huge part of her, and she felt so attached to each character, and it's why they were so developed.
Yeah.
And it's also based off of a book, so I had those kind of to go off. I had the book to go off the bones of it. It was kind of already, there were roots to it that I could build from. But I love just talking. Like instead of running scenes a million times or whatever it may be, like I love just talking for hours about the character and the character dynamics and all of that. And also with the show set in 2007. So, you know, that music is so nostalgic for me. And that's one thing that I use. I didn't allow myself to listen to music past 2008. I just listened to it all. And, Lucy, my character, loved 70s music, I decided, and, listened to music that was coming out in 2007. And it gives it an essence that I feel is so specific. And you also feel it once you put on the clothes and the costumes and the makeup, and sometimes it clicks in the first day. You're lucky if it clicks in the first day, but like it takes a while. And to embody a new person, it's so weird what we do when I'm saying it out loud.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I strive for, is the magic of having a moment on set where everything goes away and there's no separation. When you are able to become one with a character, and I mean, for me, that's so rare, but when it happens, it's like, oh, this is it. This is why I love doing it. This is what makes me feel fulfilled, is when you're able to meld and feel like one when you're embodying somebody else. And I think that's what makes people feel things when they're watching movies. Yeah. It's what makes me feel things when I'm acting. And it happens so rarely, but it's the motivation almost. It's what drives.
And it's so weird that happens so rarely, because of how much I love your work and feeling like it's so natural to you.
Everything I've done really does feel like some extension of myself and some version of myself. And it's something that really excites me for the future, is to really challenge myself and have the opportunity to fully transform and fully be able to play a character that is out of my comfort zone, that is a person I cannot relate to, and have that challenge. Because the past few things I've done, it still is challenging, but it still feels, it doesn't feel uncomfortable to me. And that's something that I really want to try and tackle, something that the uncomfort is what forces me to try and understand a different type of person that I don't necessarily fully connect to. Because I do feel like each character I've played, I really find a deep connection with them.
But I have a couple quotes here from you. I mean, there are times when you were really scared and you like leaned into it, particularly with the plays you've done, the Whirligig and Joan, Mother of the Maid, Joan of Arc and Mother of the Maid, right? I mean, here's a quote. I never got over the nerves for like 2.5 months. I was just so shook before going on stage.
It's very true.
And then you said, for Joan of Arc, you said, I almost didn't do it because I was too scared. But then I figured that's exactly the reason to do it.
Yeah. I really try and push myself to go outside of my comfort zone. And you know what? That would have been a completely different experience if I was playing that exact same part on screen. I think doing a play is a completely different beast. That is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And I've never felt so self-conscious. I've never felt so insecure, but then I've also never felt so fulfilled by the end of it and proud of myself, because it's all real and it's happening in real time. And you don't have the comfort of starting over or, taking a break. It's like you are so fully in it and you can't hide. And it's what I felt most proud of as an actor.
Mm.
And that has nothing to do with, oh, I thought I was good, I thought it was whatever. It's purely just the adrenaline of not having another option but to be in the moment and to be present. It terrifies me to do it again. Like it didn't, stop the fear of like, oh, I can do this now, I've done it. I think I will forever, that it always make me nervous no matter what. And it's also something that I know that I have to be obsessed with in order to do, because it's the most disciplined I've ever been. You just have no option but to be extremely focused and work as hard as you possibly can. And that is so, it's just so fulfilling to me. And to play Joan of Arc was the most inspiring thing I've ever done. Learning about her and being able to just steal some of her strength for 2 hours on stage, it was so empowering. And I love learning things from the characters I play. I feel like it really builds me as a person as well.
Did you take stuff that you learned from that stage experience and applied it to film work? Like, is there stuff that happened there that you're still using in your work that you would have never come about unless from that completely focused stage work?
Yes. I mean, I know it did something to me, and whether it's subconscious or not, it definitely made me feel grounded. I think just more grounded walking onto a set and knowing that I have the potential to do it if we didn't call cut, and kind of seeing every take as if mistakes were allowed and we were allowed to make them. And we also have the choice to do it again, but like to see every take as a moment of exploring and experimenting and being as present as possible and not thinking about the camera as much.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I would say the most important thing to me on set or in a play is just reacting. And that's kind of your only choice in a play, because you're seeing all actors be there interacting with each other. There's no close up. You're not seeing different performances. You're seeing reactions and real time. And I think it's made me more reliant on that when I'm on camera. And I think I do, maybe to a fault, I don't know, but I really do rely on whoever I'm acting with. And completely, it's my favorite thing to do, to go off of them. And that's the way that it feels most authentic to me, I believe. But it's in theater, you have no choice but to do that. Because everyone is seeing each performance at the same time. It's not like they can cut away and use so-and-so's best take and so-and-so's best take and it works. Like you have to, it's all one. It's such an intense collaboration. And you have to all be, everyone has to be in it and listening and there. And it's easier not to be there when you can call cut or go take a break, take a walk around, and people can be in very different places.
Yeah. And it sounds like, that's where you kind of learn that the feeding off of the other person is going to feed them, and you both can do it. Whereas with the camera, it's almost like you can be fooled into thinking it's just capturing this moment and you get this mark and this micro. But when you know what the magic that can happen with two people, and when you actually rely on each other, then it feels like, well, that amazing thing that happened on the stage can be happening here and the camera can catch it. Right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So it just feels like maybe that can come about with someone who never steps on the stage, but maybe not to an extent where you know the magic that can really happen when you rely on each other.
Right, as opposed to relying on the angle of the camera. So I'm going to
Yeah.
give my performance in order to have it be captured on this side of my face or from this
Yeah.
angle.
Yeah.
Like being able to fully commit no matter
Yes.
where the camera is,
Yes.
knowing the potential of if this moment is caught and if this interaction is captured, then that's the magic we're trying to get.
So when I first saw you, it was in that very first scene in the Meyerowitz Stories. I think that's the first thing I ever saw of you. And I love that scene so much. I mean, I love that movie. But that scene is such an amazing first scene. He is set up as a character so fast. Like, you know so much about him so fast. But you help that so much there. Being so natural and establishing a relationship with this guy who's your father. You weren't in a lot of things at that point, right? This is one of your first movies. And I got a little bit of an idea of this recently when Noah Baumbach was at the film festival earlier this year, and Sam and May were there. Your former neighbors.
Oh,
I think he's just going down the street, right?
Going down the street.
toward whatever Hoyt or whatever.
Yeah, he's going down.
He's going down the street.
Going down the block.
But those two, they're amazing in White Noise. But it's a similar kind of thing where it's like these people who are barely in anything. I think that's their first movies, but they're doing such natural and amazing work. But they had so much rehearsal time. Is that the magic here? Did you and Sandler and all these people have this time to rehearse? And is this part of what I was seeing, which felt so natural, and you guys were able to build this relationship so well?
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. We didn't have that much rehearsal. I think we all met up a few times, and I think it was important for Noah that Adam and I get to know each other and feel comfortable with each other. And that was instant. Adam is the most amazing, most funny, he's the best. And we practiced the song we sang in the movie. And he was that's also the thing. It's when you're working with incredible actors, the less it feels like performing. You just don't feel like you're performing. You just feel like you're engaging.
Right.
And that's what that scene felt like. And when there's so many factors, and Noah is just so genius because he writes so specifically, and it's such a specific tone, and he writes these characters for you. It's a full formed human being when you get the script. And that scene was so specific with the car and the stress of finding a spot, and which is also very relatable to me growing up in New York.
Very
And I think I've had the exact same scene in my real life with my real dad. So I had a lot to pull from. And the music, and it just felt that it's something I could instantly connect to. And then in addition, having Adam be so amazing and so natural, and having Noah know exactly what he wants. It was just a perfect combination. Meanwhile, I think the camera rig was on my side of the car, and Adam ran into.
Oh God!
Didn't really realize the depth perception. And I think he crashed into another car with the camera, which I hope gets released one day. But it was so hectic. And I think that only helped in that situation, because that's exactly what we're trying to portray is the stress and the anxiety and the father-daughter, he's taking off his jacket and I'm like, wait, Dad, stop. And And I think everything was helping in that moment. You know, it's just one of those things where, one of those scenes where everything's on your side, with the writing, with the actor I was working with the writer and director knowing exactly what he wants. And that's also extremely rare. Usually you get one of those things. And it set the bar really fucking high.
I was just gonna say, like, how do you go from that where all those things are working, and then you go to something else where you barely have one of those, and then you have to, like, so it's almost like unfair even to start out like that.
No, it was crazy because I did definitely, I was like, wow, this is how it is. Like, this is art. This is making art. This is magic. And then having experiences that weren't like that was probably really good for me, because to appreciate that rareness of all of those things adding up and making you feel really solid. And in the moments where it's not like that, I have learned so much.
Let's talk about Tell Me Lies by talking about one scene that I was amazed by. And I would just want to know what your thought process was on that day going into that scene. I think it's episode 5, where you're just lying on the bed and you're telling the story about your father dying. And it's like this monologue, but you're not moving. But you have to convey a lot, and like you're telling this whole story. And the camera is, I think it's pushing in on you. Is that something you were worried about coming up, or was it like, hey, I get to just lay down here? It's not, I don't have to move and hit a mark much.
Yeah, just say the words. No, I was definitely worried about that. I get worried about all emotional scenes, because I'm like, what if I'm really happy that day and I can't, I can't muster up the emotion or whatever. And there's a lot of stress that goes around emotional scenes for me. And that whole show was emotional. And I remember that day and being really nervous and reading the monologue, and really, for me, sometimes it's just saying the words and listening to the words as if like somebody else was telling me that story, and all of a sudden I'm choking up. And with that specific scene too, it's she's still, and she's speaking to this guy, but she's speaking to herself.
Yeah.
You know, she's not saying this for anybody but herself. And she's never told this story out loud.
Yeah.
She's ever processed this story. No one knows this story. And it was purely for herself. And I just remember kind of realizing that right before I did it, because beforehand I was like, oh, she's being vulnerable for the first time. She's sharing with this guy. She's connecting with this guy. Maybe this guy is the right guy. And it's just crazy how you get on set and you realize, oh no, that's not what this is.
Interesting.
This is purely her thinking out loud, and he happens to be there.
Yeah.
And when he reacts in the way that she doesn't want, she gets snapped back into reality, and gets really, puts up the wall instantly because she realized what she just shared.
Yeah.
And that was so truthful to me. because I feel like, I don't know, with trauma or with sadness, when you're sharing that, you never know what you're going to get. And it's just, I really loved that scene because it showed that she has not dealt with anything.
Yeah.
And it only made her retreat further back into herself by sharing this story.
Yeah.
Like, it did the opposite of effect of what maybe she thought it would do.
Right.
And she closes off. And it was just so truthful to see, because it's just so scary to share those things in real life and to want a specific reaction and specific comfort. And she didn't get it. And I really, I understood that a lot.
And isn't it so interesting that when you say it like that, where it wasn't quite until you were there that it clicked in on what, her intention was. Somebody else could play that in the intention that you were talking about, which is like trying to open up, trying to connect. It might not play right, and you'd be wondering why, and that kind of stuff scares the hell out of me, because it's the kind of stuff I'm talking about how like a tiny little choice kind of settles in and it makes it right. And if you do the tiny little choice, which is not that insane to think would be the right choice, it would be fine, but it wouldn't be right.
Right. And I know. And there's never any way to know what the other choice would have been like,
right,
Right. And you're so right. It could be so minor, like just the difference between looking at him and telling that story and not looking at him.
Right.
Telling that story and choosing one spot to like.
Well, this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this goes to like what if the director said, you got to face him. We're going to have you both on pillows. You're facing each other. And you're like, in a moment like that, you are understanding this character, these words better than anyone around. And it's just a little choice could send you down the wrong road. And it makes me wonder, like I look at the director list of this show, which I couldn't believe because it feels so cohesive. But there's 5 different directors. Yeah. And like with 2 episodes each. Tell me how that was. I ask a lot of people this that have do TV shows, and I get different answers. I mean, this is either they're bringing different things that are beneficial to you, or it feels like schizophrenic.
Right. So many voices and opinions. And yeah, I mean, Sam Boyd, who directed 4 and 5, was so amazing. And especially in that scene, he's so aware of the emotion behind it, and like, and really understood the characters, and is so trusting. He was so trusting of us, which feels so good. And especially at, episode 5, and we've done it for 4 episodes, and you do feel like these people, and to feel trusted in that moment was a really, really great feeling. And also, like, sorry, I'm just thinking of this, going back to what we were saying about like the smallest choice. It's like, it's so subjective too to the actor. Like, another actress could have done that scene staring at him and could have been just as vulnerable, and it worked as well. But to me, my truth is, when I'm being vulnerable, it's way easier to not look at the person and stare off. And that's when real emotion can come out of me. If I'm, but another person could
you're right.
Look in the eyes to somebody and tell them a really intense story and be just as vulnerable. And that's the thing, you never ever know, but you just have to trust what feels right to the person. Yes. I think. Anyway, I just thought of that as we were speaking.
Yeah.
but back to the directors. it was really interesting. And of course there was a worry of, oh, is this going to feel like 5 different shows because of the 5 different directors? And I really think that because Megan, the showrunner, understood the show so well, she really created a unity with the directors and had such a vision for the show and for the tone that she just passed on to each director. And I think they all do have their own kind of twist and feel to them, which I really like too. And the episodes also just get more and more intense and crazy and juicy, and it feels like such a escalation, and which is kind of cool because each director had their period of time that kind of, each episode has an escalation of its own. So like each director kind of got their arc with the characters. Really interesting, and really interesting to see the different directors' takes on scenes and the characters. And what I loved about the show so much is that, you know, the people who watched it or everyone on set, they felt such a personal connection to it, because they've all been in an experience like that. So like to feel like each director was kind of projecting their experience on it was so interesting, because that's what we were all doing. We're all like, we're all pulling from stories we've heard, or, you know, toxic relationships that we've been in or witnessed or whatever. And it was such a, everyone had a piece of their heart in it, which was really beautiful and invasive, because everyone felt like it was about them, you know, and had so much to say about it. So it was just a constant discussion, which was so cool. It's like, I feel like sometimes a director can come on and they're doing their job and they understand it and it's great, but they don't necessarily relate to it. And I feel like every director had their own story to tell through it.
I'm a big fan, a really, really big fan of your sister, June.
No way.
I have seen her movie. I'm being real. 5 times.
You saw Youngest?
5 times.
Isn't she amazing in that?
I'm sure she's in college by now. This was 3. I mean, how old? I mean, this was like 3 years ago.
She was 7 when she did that, and she's 11 now. Yeah, 5 years ago.
But I've heard you say, and it's so. I think if I didn't know of her, I would still be charmed by when I hear you say that she's your idol, which you say in a lot of interviews. But knowing her, or knowing of her from just that movie.
No, that's her. That's her.
I figured. But I believe you when you say that she's your idol, and I believe that you, as an artist, as an actor, there's something in your sister that you are recognizing, and that you want to be like. And I want to know what that is from your inner artist and how she's helping that.
I am so inspired by her all the time. She's such an individual, and I admire that so much. You know, I pick her up from school and she stands out like a sore thumb, and not in a way like, oh, she's trying to be seen or she's trying to look cool. Like, she's so purely herself in the sea of pink frilly tutus at her school, you know, like, and she's in her Air Force Ones and her chains, and she's just like, she is such a presence that I admire so much. And I think from growing up with just a bunch of older people, she has no friends her age. She's just always like, her best friends are older, and she's just I forget she's 11 when I'm hanging out with her. She's just, she gets it. She's so there with you, and she's in on the joke. Most of the time I'm not. Like, she's in on it. She's so quick, and I think that just comes from, like, I find it so interesting when people are like, what would you say to your younger self, or how would you change? And I feel like as an artist, I'm always constantly trying to retreat back to my younger self and accept that and bring it out of me, because you look at young kids, and before they're aware of themselves, and before they're trying and seeking validation, and they're so free and unself-conscious. And I think that's really what I crave as an artist, and what I enjoy watching the most, and always what I'm trying to emulate is just free, childlike spirit without any, filter of the outside world telling me you're this, you're ugly, you're not talented, you're this. Like, to put the blinders on and be completely just free and yourself. And I really only see that in kids. And I find it so amazing. And I love having a little kid in my life that I can be inspired by every day.
Grace Van Patten, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy I finally did this. I've been scared for a long time, and I appreciate your interest and your curiosity, and thank you for talking to me.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.